And what shall we call him, my love?
Ezio. Ezio Auditore da Firenze.
Welcome back to Driven by Story here on Reluctantly Productive. This is a series where I try to figure out what story-driven games are trying to tell us. I'm going to ask the following. What is this game trying to say? Does it say it well? And is it worth saying? For more on the ins and outs of this methodology, check out my first video, which you can find here. This time we're traveling back to 2009, but also to 1476, as we take on the second installment of the Assassin's Creed franchise. To this day, Assassin's Creed 2 is widely held up as either the best or second best game in the series, only losing to AC Brotherhood, which coincidentally is next on my list. Additionally, Ezio, the protagonist of AC2, Brotherhood, and Revelations, is generally regarded as the best protagonist and perhaps the best assassin in the franchise. There's a lot of love surrounding this game, but is it based on the game itself or as a follow-up to the ultimately disappointing AC1?
Get in.
What's with the blood? Are you okay?
Look, we have maybe 10 minutes, maybe, before they figure out what I've done. If we're not out of here and on the road before then...
Wait, we're leaving?
Desmond, I promise I'll answer all of your questions later. But right now, I need you to just shut up and do what I say. So please, get in the Animus.
All right.
First, the briefest overview of our plot. The game opens on Desmond and Lucy, our protagonists from the first game, escaping the Abstergo facility we became familiar with. After a quick escape, we find our two modern-day protagonists in the warehouse, the makeshift headquarters of Lucy's assassin cell. We're introduced to Rebecca, a super smart hacker and engineer who has built her own version of the Animus, Animus 2.0.
Actually, I prefer Animus 2.0, since baby's twice as awesome as anything you'll find at Abstergo.
This is a way for the game to let you know that this shit is gonna be upgraded in this version. I expect next game we'll get Animus Brotherhood. We also meet Simon, an overly snarky intelligence officer and hacker and assassin coordinator.
What's all this stuff for?
This stuff, Desmond. Oh, this stuff is nothing special, really, this stuff. It's just the stuff that keeps our entire operation from falling apart, really. It requires a great deal of concentration to keep it all moving, so you'll forgive me if I don't have time to play meet and greet.
Sean's in charge of maintaining our knowledge archives. It's like a digital library. He'll be riding shotgun with me while you're in the Animus. So if you come across anything of note, people, places, events, etc., he'll create database entries you can consult for additional information.
Yeah, it's not just databases, though. I also provide tactical support for the other assassins. You know, Desmond, the ones who are out there, actually doing stuff, risking their lives, little things like that.
Anyway, Lucy tells Desmond that he needs to explore the memories of a new ancestor, Ezio Auditore, in order to find the Piece of Eden again. She also tells Desmond that he'll begin to experience what they call the bleeding effect, which will allow Desmond the ability to learn all of his ancestors' skills, thus becoming a proper assassin and not just an assassin by lineage.
I still don't see how I fit into things.
We're going to train you. Turn you into one of us.
What? No, you've seen me in action. I'm no good at this, and even if I was, it would take months. Years even.
No, not with the Animus. Not with the bleeding effect.
But I'm just one guy.
Sometimes, that's all you need.
Once Desmond is back in the Animus, we're properly introduced to Ezio, right as he gets into a fight with a rival family. We quickly meet the rest of the Auditore family and get sent on some missions by his mother, sister, and father in order to acquaint ourselves with new game mechanics such as carrying items, healing, and the various types of missions in the game. We also meet Leonardo da Vinci.
Hello, Leonardo.
Madonna Maria.
This prologue gives us an iconic shot. And quickly lets us know that Ezio fucks.
Come here.
Oh, Ezio. Oh, Ezio.
And then things go bad for Ezio and the family, quickly.
Father? Federico!
Ser Ezio! Thank God!
What happened? Where is everyone?
They took your father and brothers to the Palazzo della Signoria, to prison.
Ezio's father is an assassin who is accused of treason against the city of Florence, and he, along with Ezio's two brothers, are publicly hanged.
Giovanni Auditore, you and your accomplices stand accused of the crime of treason. Have you any evidence to counter this charge?
Yes, the documents that were delivered to you last night.
I'm afraid I know nothing of these documents.
He's lying! Need to get closer.
In the absence of any compelling evidence to the contrary, I am bound to pronounce you guilty. You and your collaborators are hereby sentenced to death.
You are the traitor, Roberto, and one of them. You may take our lives this day, but we will have yours in return, I swear! We will!
Ezio then takes up his father's old assassin gear and gets to work getting revenge, uncovering a wider and more dangerous conspiracy than he could ever have anticipated, and vows to make everyone responsible for his family's death pay. About midway through Ezio's revenge plot, we're forced from the Animus so Lucy can test Desmond's skills. He jumps on some crates and turns on some sensors that seem like they could have been just approached normally, but hey, assassin stuff. On the walk back, Desmond has a hallucination and briefly embodies Altair, the protagonist from the last game. He controls Altair as he chases a woman down and then has sex with her, coming to the realization that he just watched his very distant grandparents getting nasty. Back in the Animus, Ezio continues to follow the villain of this game, a hooded man known as the Spaniard, striking down Templar agents whenever they get in his way. He discovers that the Templar plan is to open something called the Vault, and to do so, they need 2 pieces of Eden. Ezio also learns that this Spaniard is named Rodrigo Borgia, the master of the Templar in this time, and then Simon remembers that Rodrigo Borgia becomes Pope, and we're off to Rome to fight the Pope.
Oh dear.
Sean?
Of course. How could I have forgotten?
You want to share with the rest of us?
Rodrigo Borgia is elected Pope in 1492, which means Ezio's greatest enemy is now also the most powerful man in Italy.
Always wanted to visit the Vatican.
Well, your luck's in, Desmond. Happy days. Because that's exactly where you're going.
Kinda. In the original version of Assassin's Creed 2, we would have been. However, there are 2 DLC inserted to the PC remaster version that are unskippable, so before we go off to Rome, Ezio needs to save the children of a noblewoman he befriended, and then get stabbed, and then lose the apple, and kill 9 random guys, and retrieve the apple, and then we're off to Rome to fight the Pope. For real this time.
Let us see what you are made of, old man.
Once in Rome, Ezio infiltrates the Vatican and fights the Pope for a while. Once he finally defeats Rodrigo Borgia, he doesn't kill him because, in Ezio's mind, having the Master of Templar also be the Master of all Catholics isn't a problem.
Get it over with, then. No. Killing you won't bring my family back. I'm done.
Ezio then opens the vault, which is an underground bunker built by the first civilization. Gasp! Remember them? And accesses a message from those that came before. A being identifying herself as Minerva tells Ezio that humans were created by those that came before, but there was a war and then a solar flare, and so the 2 species learned to work together. However, Minerva warns, there's another big flare coming, and time is short. Ezio is confused, and then Minerva tells him to shut up because she's talking to Desmond, and the game basically ends on Desmond going, what the fuck?
It is done. The message is delivered. We are gone now from this world. All of us. We can do no more. The rest is up to you, Desmond.
What? Who is Desmond? I don't understand. Please, wait. I have so many questions.
What the fuck?
Kinda. We're treated to a mid-credit scene in which the modern-day assassins are discovered by Abstergo and only have moments to pack up and flee before they're captured. Lucy tosses Desmond a wristblade, and then you go downstairs only to find Vidic. Gasp! Remember him? And some goons waiting for you.
Mr. Miles, this is an unexpectedly pleasant turn of events. And here I thought I'd have to waste more men on you. Kind of you to save me the trouble.
Ezio and Lucy dispatch the goons because no one brought a gun, and Vidic escapes. We fade to black, hearing Rebecca's voice telling us not to worry. She's rigged up the Animus in the escape van so that Desmond can continue training. And then the game ends. For real this time.
For years, no, decades, we've sought these answers.
And now, at last, we have them.
What is this game trying to say? This is actually a more complicated question to answer in AC2 than in AC1, and that's because for a vast majority of the game, the primary driver of Ezio's action is simple revenge. He's not part of the Assassin Brotherhood until the game is nearly over, and even then, the overwhelming motivation for him to journey to the Vatican and fight the Pope is to finish off Rodrigo Borgia and avenge the death of his family.
Lashea waka umutlak bel kulun munkin. These are the words spoken by our ancestors that lay at the heart of our creed.
Where other men blindly follow the truth, remember,
nothing is true.
Where other men are limited by morality or law, remember,
everything is permitted.
We work in the dark to serve the light. We are assassins.
Nothing is true. Everything is permitted. It is time, Ezio. In this modern age, we are not so literal as our ancestors, but our seal is no less permanent. Are you ready to join us?
I am.
In fact, the creed of the last game, involving blending with the crowd, not betraying the Brotherhood, and never killing innocents, is nowhere to be found in this game. Gone are the extended death tunnels and big lore dumps, and along with it, the light philosophy and spiritual conversations. But that doesn't mean the game is without message or purpose. Much like its predecessor, Assassin's Creed 2 has several themes that the game brings to the forefront, even as we're watching Ezio walk and talk for the 100th time. The most obvious story this game is telling us is one about the value of revenge. For most of the first two acts, Ezio pursues this goal of revenge with a single-minded fervor. In fact, his first act of revenge is barely an assassination, instead resembling more a plain murder.
And to think I once thought of just you! You would have done the same. To save the ones you love.
Yes, I would. And I have.
The Auditori are not dead! I'm still here! Me! Ezio! Ezio Auditore!
As Ezio grows more skilled through the game, his rage is focused, controlled, but his motivations don't really mature. For a good long while, it feels as though we're basically in control of a killing machine who will murder his way to the top of a conspiracy regardless of the cost. It's not until Act 3 that we even see the remote signs of regret in Ezio, and even then, it's regret that the job isn't done yet.
It's my birthday.
Davvero? 100 di questi giorni. That's wonderful.
Is it? It's been over 10 years since I watched my father and brothers die. 10 years hunting the men responsible. So close to the end now, but no closer to understanding what any of it was for.
As our protagonist and point of view in the world, we're meant to empathize, if not completely agree, with Ezio's feelings, and it's hard not to. Revenge is a powerful motivator, and it's been a staple basically since humans could write. I mean, shit, Inanna sent down the Bull of Heaven to kill Gilgamesh out of revenge. But even if we don't find it in ourselves to agree with Ezio, the people of the world do, as absolutely none of them attempt to stop him on this quest, instead just urging him to do it cautiously so as to not die in the process. However, when Ezio begins to lament how long it's been and the task still isn't complete, the game suddenly becomes uninterested in revenge, instead moving the plot forward with the Apple of Eden and the revelation that everyone important in his life is also an assassin and now he has to stop the Templar.
This is for my father. Paula.
He's gone, but we have what we came for.
No, I need to go after him.
Do you really now? Or are you here for another reason, my son?
Theodora, what? What are you all doing here?
Perhaps the same thing you are, Ezio. Hoping to see the Prophet appear.
I came here to kill the Spaniard. I couldn't care less about your Prophet. He never showed up.
No, but you did.
What?
A Prophet's arrival was foretold. And unbeknownst to us, here you are. Perhaps all along, you were the one we sought.
Cosa? Who are you?
Niccolò di Bernardo de Machiavelli. I am an assassin, trained in the ancient ways to safeguard mankind's evolution. Just like you, and each one of us here.
You are all assassins? Paula. Volpe.
It's true, Nipote. We have all been guiding you for years, teaching you the skills you would need to join our ranks. I think it's time.
I'd like to say that this offers us some kind of insight on the nature of revenge, whether it's that the pursuit is pointless or that the goal is noble, but the game offers nothing to support either conclusion. Instead, we're meant to view the avengement of the family Auditore as the stepping stone that Ezio needed to step into his destiny as the world's greatest assassin, or something. Ezio does tell Robert Borgia that the reason he won't take his life is because it won't bring his family back, so maybe that's our conclusion, but it feels pretty weak and something like a throwaway line so that we can understand why Robert Borgia is still alive in the next game. Spoiler, it's because he didn't die as a pope until a little bit later in the timeline. Often when I find myself looking for supporting evidence for a hero's actions, I go to look at the villains and see how our hero stands juxtaposed against them. This doesn't do much for us in AC2, unfortunately. In my review of the previous title, I talked at length about how the villains were at least somewhat nuanced and none of them were cartoonishly evil. That went straight out the window in this game.
I knew you would come.
Where is Jacopo?
So you can do to him what you've done to me?
There is still time for you to clear your conscience.
We gather at the church when a meeting is called.
Every main conspirator that Ezio seeks out is obviously evil, to the level of parody. The only exception to this might be the second villain you slay, Vieri de Pazzi, and to come to that realization requires you to do some non-story reading that we'll talk more about in Section 3. Otherwise, every villain here is flat as a board, simply existing as a prop in the story for Ezio to kill and get one step closer to Rodrigo. Even the hated Pazzi, the family that was in rivalry with the Auditore, and the Barbaggios, a family with rich history in Venice and Italy, are just bland placeholders for Ezio to kill.
Now Firenze will judge you for what you've done.
It's over. It's all over.
Meglio essere felici in questa vita che aspirare a esserlo nella prossima. Requiescat in pace.
So, what lesson are we to take away about revenge? According to AC2, revenge is fine for a while as long as the people you're taking revenge on are objectively shitty. After that, I guess you have to hope that they're Templar? Kinda? That would be the takeaway from this game without the DLC. And this seems to be a good place to divert for just a second and talk about the two versions of Assassin's Creed 2. To explain briefly, when Assassin's Creed 2 launched, players guided Ezio through memory sequences 1 through 11 and then jumped to 14, with Rebecca, the aforementioned super hacker assassin, mentioning that there seemed to be some memory corruption. Ubisoft then released memory sequences 12 and 13 as DLC later on, and in the PC remaster, these memories are placed in the game in order with no way to bypass them and play the original experience. I'll talk a little bit more about this in Section 3. Anyway, in his famous Ezio speech, which I'm going to use just a snippet of here and then in full in a moment, he says this.
Vengeance clouded my mind. It would have consumed me, were it not for the wisdom of a few strangers. Taught me to look past my instincts. They never preached answers, but guided me to learn from myself.
This talk of vengeance clouding his mind and how it would have consumed him if not for the wisdom of a few strangers who taught him to look past his instincts is a very generous interpretation and or reading of the events of this game, especially since one of the people he lingers on is his uncle, who encouraged him not to leave for Spain and instead stay in Italy with his family to finish his father's work of, assassinating.
Well done, Nipote. You've really come into your own.
Thank you, Uncle, for all you have given me.
Your family. Such is my duty and my desire.
I'm glad you had me stay.
Good. You've reconsidered leaving.
We sail for Spain in 3 days.
But Nipote, I have given you these skills that you might be better prepared to strike against our enemies.
And if they find me, I will.
You want to leave Ezio? To throw away everything your father fought and died for? To deny your heritage? Fine. Come vuoi. Arrivederci e buona fortuna.
Uncle, wait!
However, it is what the protagonist is saying, and since we don't have any evidence of Ezio as an unreliable narrator, we do have to accept that this is truly how he feels. In that case, it's a little more fair to say that, taken as a whole, AC2 wants to tell us that revenge itself isn't necessarily good if that's all that drives you. Instead, we should take that passion, that fervor, and use it wisely to achieve our goals in the best way possible. And maybe make friends with Machiavelli along the way for guidance.
Cosa
Who are you?
Niccolò di Bernardo de Machiavelli.
The next story the game surfaces to us is a familiar one, the struggle of liberty versus order. While not as forward-facing as it is in the first game, this tale is still present in Assassin's Creed 2, although mostly in the DLC that's been added to the story. In the original non-DLC storyline, there's almost no mention of a new, better world brought about via order, or a better tomorrow, or anything of that, save for one villain.
Do not be afraid.
I feel no fear, Assassin. Only regret. I sought unity, stability, order.
At too great a cost.
Progress demands sacrifice.
Ezio never truly states his preference for freedom or liberty either, since as you saw, his rebuke to the villain above was "Nuh-uh." As mentioned earlier, the bulk of the game is the story of Ezio's revenge and his slight wonderings about the nature of that revenge, and the motivations of both him and the villains are left relatively untouched. That changes in the Bonfire Vanities DLC, with one of everyone's favorite Ezio moments. This time, I'll play the scene in full.
Silenzio! Silenzio! 22 years ago, I stood where I stand now, and watched my loved ones die, betrayed by those I had called friends. Vengeance clouded my mind. It would have consumed me, were it not for the wisdom of a few strangers. Taught me to look past my instincts. They never preached answers, but guided me to learn from myself. We don't need anyone to tell us what to do. Not Savonarola, not the Medici. We are free to follow our own path. There are those who will take that freedom from us. Too many of you gladly give it. But it is our ability to choose whatever you think is true that makes us human. There is no book or teacher to give you the answers, to show you the path. Choose your own way. Do not follow me or anyone else.
We don't need anyone to tell us what to do. It is our ability to choose whatever you think is true that makes us human. Do not follow me or anyone else. These statements are really the few that give us any kind of insight into Ezio's beliefs, and they represent an almost libertarian collectivist point of view. Obviously, that's not exactly right, but I'm already going to talk a bunch in this video, and I feel like a deep dive into the particulars of a specific political ideology is better done elsewhere by smarter people. Anyway, these statements are obviously at odds with the Templar ideals of control and order, which would necessitate following and not choosing, etc. There's not much more on this theme in the game, aside from vague allusions to the idea that the people Ezio stopped were making things worse for the common man. So maybe the most telling thing here is that, as both Ezio and a player, we never actually get to confront these ideas for ourselves. We are meant to just accept that that self-determination is the right course for all people, and that any attempt to subvert this is wrong, full stop. And once again, before I dive into a little bit of counter-argument, I want to mention that I personally tend to agree with this, and that for 99% of people, self-determination is one of the most defining elements of human existence, with that 1% being people who are medically incapable of choosing for themselves due to things like severe illness or trauma that has substantially hindered their ability to make decisions. Anyway, my CYA aside, it's more than a little hypocritical for the assassins of this time to support a Doge system, which, by the time this story is told, was limited to only families in the Venetian Book of Nobles, and the rule of the Medici, who were wealthy plutocrats with a hereditary title bestowed upon them. The message of independence, do not follow me or anyone else, that Ezio puts forward in this scene clearly needs some asterisks. How can we truly self-determine if there's no practical way for someone born wrong to ever lead their country? How would one born into such nobility even remotely understand what it means to be a commoner? With or without a piece of alien technology, the fairly opaque upper levels of government have enough power to accuse a family of treason and have them executed the next day, with minimal time for exploration or evidence. They can put guards on the streets that will kill you for running into them, in this game anyway. They can raise taxes for arsenals and fleets that you, a commoner, have no say in. Is there really any self-determination to be found there? This is, of course, no different than the assassins in AC1, but at least Altair seems to have learned something by the time this game takes place, which leads us into the two non-Ezio messages of this game. Aside from the major arc of revenge and the minor arc of liberty, there are two stories that this game tells that don't revolve around Ezio or the events of 15th century Italy. The first of these is the legacy of Altair. In my criticism of the first game, I called Altair kind of a dum-dum, and I meant it. There's also mention that he's given a chance to grow in future games, and that's here. Aside from a scene where we control Altair, more on that in a second, we don't actually see him in this game because it wouldn't make sense. No one lives 300 years unless he found some piece of Eden that allows him to live forever, like some kind of vampire assassin. Vampire Assassin, coming 2024 from Ubisoft. But we do find out that the simple man who couldn't understand the idea that killing a governor is political has blossomed into a full-on philosopher and written a codex full of messages with a map inlaid for those with eagle vision. My first thought was that a prophecy/codex written by Altair would be some Dr. Seuss stuff, but no. Many of the codex pages discuss some things I mentioned myself. If the assassins are pro-freedom, how do they justify killing people? Are they not obedient to a master, just like those they claim to oppose? Others fill in more of Altair's backstory, speaking of his father and his upbringing, while still more help us bridge the gap in assassin history from the Second Crusade to the height of merchant Venice. It would be tempting for someone like me, a reformed Altair stan, to try to point to this as some kind of proof that they wanted to do more with Altair in AC1 but ran out of time or money and had to get the project out. I think that's a fun idea, but it's likely disingenuous. No, it's more likely that these were written as a way to let us know why so many of the things from AC1 are nowhere to be found, from the original creed, to the idea of bureaus, to the decentralization of the Assassin Brotherhood itself. Altair also represents the ultimate in Ezio's equipment, as a sword of Altair is available for purchase and is the best weapon in the game, stats-wise, and there's an entire shrine to Altair below the villa, requiring Ezio to clear 6 tombs in order to retrieve Altair's armor, also the best in the game. As I said though, none of this is shown, and honestly even the weapons and armor are completely unnecessary, so this falls in the category of lore/world building and is not truly a major point of the game. But what about Desmond? Absolutely none of you have asked. You've probably noticed that I've made almost no mention of the modern day story, and that's for 2 reasons. The first is that aside from the beginning and end of the game, you're only forced in the modern day one other time, a drastic reduction from the amount of time spent out of the Animus in AC1. The other reason is that absolutely none of the themes of this game are present in the modern day timeline. As mentioned in my recap, the modern day story focuses primarily on getting Desmond ready to fight by having him learn the skills of Ezio via the bleeding effect, which is basically osmosis plus sci-fi magic. As for why the assassins need Desmond to do this, well, because Templars suck and Abstergo sucks. It's actually relatively unclear up until the end what this game is building to, and when you get there, the answers are a little jarring, and not in a good way. Throughout the game, when Desmond is in the Animus controlling Ezio, he's able to find glyphs on buildings and scan them using his eagle vision. These glyphs are pieces of a video file left behind by Subject 16, the one who came before Desmond, who left all the creepy drawings in blood we saw at the end of the first game. We'll find out more about him for some reason in a future game, I think it's Revelations. To decrypt these files, we play what could loosely be called minigames and get little snippets of the video labeled as the truth.
But that's one of the symbols. What does it mean? It must be there for...
Wait, that's not possible. This can't be. Hold on, that's computer code. Let me compile it. Oh shit, it's an encrypted file.
Upload it to my computer. I'll master decryption.
I can't. It's only compatible with the Animus itself.
Upload it to Desmond then. I can't believe this.
Hello, this is... They call me Subject 16. Listen, I don't have much time. There's something I have to show you. We have been lied to this whole time. Everything we know, everything we've been brought up to believe, it's wrong. Okay, I've uploaded the evidence, the file that proves it all, but I've split it into 20 pieces and locked each with a code. Can't be too careful. Queen Isabella. No, not her. What century is it? Never mind. I've hidden the code to the first file inside this program. Find it. Find them all. And along the way, you'll begin to see the truth.
What the heck? How did this get inside Animus?
Oh, the memory core. We transferred 16's memory data from Abstergo into the Animus 2.0. He must have hacked the machine when Vidic left him alone between sessions.
Hold on, wait a second. The signs on the walls in Abstergo, the ones written in blood, those were clues. He was telling us to look for them inside the Animus.
Unlocking all 20 fragments lets you watch the whole video unsnippeted, which reveals 2 humans named Adam and Eve, get it, running from a highly advanced facility in possession of the Apple of Eden.
Adam, I have it.
Eve.
Look out!
Wow.
Was that what I think it was?
We'll send the video out for analysis as soon as Desmond's done in the machine.
You okay?
He'd be able to explain the whole thing to us. If only we could ask him.
We're told via the minigames the story of world events being influenced by the Templars throughout time, and the pieces of Eden present at each. This all ties into the end of Ezio's story. As mentioned above, after punching out the Pope, Ezio gains access to something known as the Vault. He enters the Vault, he discovers futuristic sci-fi feeling markings on the wall, and as he approaches a pedestal, a projection comes to life with a message for him.
Listen. When we were still flesh and our home still whole, your kind betrayed us. We who made you. We who gave you life. We were strong, but you were many, and both of us craved war. So busy were we with earthly concerns, we failed to notice the heavens. And by the time we did, the world burned until naught remained but ash. It should have ended then and there. But we built you in our own image. We built you to survive. And so we did. Few were our numbers, your kind and mine. It took sacrifice, strength, compassion. But we rebuilt. And as life returned to the world, we endeavored to ensure this tragedy would not be repeated. But now, we are dying, and time will work against us. Truth turned into myth and legend. What we built, misunderstood. Let my words preserve the message and make a record of our loss. But let my words also bring hope. You must find the other temples, built by those who knew to turn away from war. They worked to protect us, to save us from the fire. If you can find them, if their work can be saved, so too might this world. Be quick, for time grows short, and guard against the cross, for there are many who will stand in your way.
You see, all this was a big setup for these pre-human aliens, or pre-Homo sapien life forms. I suppose at this point we don't know that they're aliens, to warn Desmond specifically of an impending solar flare that could destroy the Earth. Minerva is very confusingly tells us in what will be the first of many Deus Ex Machina, literally, that humans fought with the first civilization and that they all got rocked by a solar flare and now it's going to happen again. How they knew about Desmond and why he's the chosen one is left for us to find out later. When writing this, I was torn on whether I wanted to talk at length about bullshit ancient aliens now or save that for a future video, and I realized that I'm at 7 pages just for the first section alone, with much more to say, so I'll just state here that the very concept of ancient aliens is stupid conspiracy theory bullshit, more so than many other conspiracy theories in the game, and all the stuff that has to do with those that came before is easily my least favorite part of the series. The only reason it even remotely works in this game is that we're already indulging literally every conspiracy theory. AC2 alone has the Templars stating that the moon landing was fake, there was a second shooter on the grassy knoll, etc. And so to have this one be true as well is at least par for the course and doesn't feel shoehorned in out of nowhere. Anyway, I mentioned that the game ends here, and as such, it doesn't really give us a take, if you will, on the concept of ancient aliens, besides Desmond saying, "What the fuck?" And I think that accurately sums up how most of us felt the first time we saw it, and marks a natural transition to our third chapter.
All done. I filled your blade with a bit of poison to start with. Should you run out, just visit a doctor.
Poison? From a doctor?
In high enough doses, that which cures can kill.
Does it say it well? No. Well, yeah, sure, but actually no. If we look at this question from a sheerly metric-based perspective, then yes, the main story is critical to the game in that, as in the first installment, there is no way to proceed forward without completing this story. It is central to the game and is told directly to the player with no real chance to avoid it, whether by accident or done purposefully. It's the accessibility factor that hinders this game from really actually delivering on its message. When I talk about accessibility here, I do want to be clear I'm not talking about how the term is used today, which is generally in reference to various game options being included to help colorblind, visually impaired, or deaf gamers have better access to the title. I mean it more in the sense of how likely it is that the quote-unquote average gamer is going to be able to absorb the story by just playing the game. While there is no set definition of what an average gamer is or what their comprehensive abilities are, we thankfully do have some data from the ESA that tells us in 2009, the average gamer was 35 years old, with 18 to 49-year-olds making up 49% of the total people who play games. Assuming that most people in that age range have school and or full-time jobs, it's relatively safe to say that when they sit down to spend their precious free time with the game, they're not necessarily looking to read in-game files, solve precious, inessential puzzles, and sit through non-interactive cutscenes full of exposition and lore. In fact, if you go search through the reviews from AC1's launch, you'll see that several call out the static monologue-esque natures of the death tunnels and cutscenes after every mission as boring and non-interactive. And it's this criticism that I believe AC2 attempted to rebuke, but clumsily. In place of minutes-long death tunnels, Ezio's conversations with his victims are 30 seconds, tops. And boy oh boy, I hope I get to hear Requiescat in Pace 10,000 more times.
Requiescat in pace. 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 Requiescat in pace.
Requiescat in pace.
In place of static cutscenes where all we can do is select different camera angles, we get so many info dumps via walking and talking. Seriously, did Aaron Sorkin have a part in this?
Walk with me.
You want to ask me something?
Come, Ezio, walk with me.
Walk with me. Stay close.
Do I know you?
You know my work. Walk with me. I'm Aaron Sorkin.
And in place of our barely there bureau chiefs, we instead get a cast of characters that involves Ezio's surviving families, a bunch of barely there assassin helpers. Seriously, this game disposes of characters like its early Game of Thrones. All this means that we spend less time watching and more time doing, which is, of course, a good thing for players. While most of the demographic I mentioned above is unlikely to want to read files in-game, they probably don't want to just have a game talk at them incessantly. They want to, play. Unfortunately, this means that to get some of the richer bits of storytelling, we actually need to dive into the menus and read all the documents. Even more importantly, we need to play the Subject 16 minigames to unlock the truth. You see, Ezio and the rest of the crew of assassins make almost no effort to talk about or explain or discover more about those who came before, content to recognize the Apple of Eden as a powerful artifact with minimal questions. As mentioned above, the vast majority of this game's story centers on Ezio's quest for revenge, pivoting only in the very last chapter. Aside from Leonardo mentioning that it's an item that shouldn't exist, the only part of the game that focuses on those who came before are the Subject 16 minigames. That means when the ending comes around and focuses exclusively on Desmond and the aliens that apparently made humans, it's a huge shift from the entire rest of the game, jarring us back into remembering, oh yeah, there's something else going on. When Desmond says our ending, what the fuck, it's obviously in response to being spoken to from the past by an alien that knows the future, but it's also a great closing line to encapsulate player feelings. But enough about the aliens. They show up in at least the next 6 titles, and we'll have plenty of time to bitch about them. AC2 stumbles in a second area that really exacerbates the first, and that is pacing. Even if you're mashing through everything as quickly as possible, you'll be receiving tutorials for at least the first 2 hours of gameplay.
Well, Benissimo. If you start paying for improvements to the town, I'll keep track of them in this book. And since I have nothing better to do, I'll also make note of any objects you bring in from the outside. If you actually get this place up and running, travelers might visit and spend money.
John Ezio.
Now, if you hope to defeat these Astardi, I will need to teach you a few things. Meet me on the practice field.
These include incredibly pointless side missions, which teach you how to perform things like beat up and courier missions, how difficult those would be to figure out on your own, and learning how to care for your uncle's villa, which just screams avenging my family. All of this is worked into the normal flow of the game so that you have no choice but to go from fleeing Firenze to combat tutorials to codex tutorials to villa tutorials, etc. Adding to this problem are the 2 inserted DLCs, which very awkwardly slam the brakes on the main storyline as it approaches its climax, forcing us to do some errands that feel out of place even if you didn't know they were shoehorned in later. Aside from this, AC2 delivers a much better play experience than 1, although some additions, such as the ever-present infamy system and missions that having absolutely no room for error about being detected. Seriously, sometimes the guard sees you for a split second and as you're mid-leap to kill him and the mission fails. Are obnoxious and feel unnecessary. Thankfully, they never really interfere with the story that much, and aside from what was called out above, it's pretty easy to play through the story and pick up what it has to put down. There's a couple of bobs and bits I want to throw in at this point as they don't fit cleanly into one category or another, but I think they're worth mentioning. As described earlier, Ezio, his mother, and his sister all flee to the villa when the rest of the family is hanged. One of the tasks you're given is in the various tutorials is to find 100 feathers scattered throughout the game in order to stop your mother from grieving the loss of her youngest son, Petruchio. You may remember him as the one that's clearly a puppet come to life.
You should be in bed.
I want those feathers.
What for?
It's a secret.
If I get them for you, will you go back inside?
Yes, I promise.
Even with the map, this took me an hour, and I was consciously looking for them as I traversed the city. This is very much of its time. AC1 had something like 400 flags hidden throughout the world, so I suppose this is an improvement, and it at least rewards you with the scene between Ezio and his mother.
Thank you, Ezio, for not forgetting about.
But unless you're a completionist, this isn't worth doing. These kind of things are added to games to artificially extend their playtime, which is something I'll be talking about when I get to reviewing Rogue or hop over to Mass Effect. The other thing I want to bring up is, Ezio is a Mary Sue. This is not the hottest of takes, as I know I've seen others make the same point, but it's true nonetheless. Ezio is a young man who has a special gift, is a skilled climber and fighter, invents lattes.
Prego. Can I offer you something? Biscotti. Un caffè.
What's caffè?
An interesting concoction brought to me by a Turk merchant. Here, have a taste.
A little bitter if you ask me. It just seems lacking somehow. I don't know, have you considered adding sugar maybe? Or latte?
Meets both Leonardo da Vinci and Machiavelli. Is the prophet/chosen one. Is the greatest assassin ever. Is never caught. Is mortally wounded twice and survives. Amongst other things. I mean, by the end of the game, even if you never improve Monteregione at all, Ezio has enough florins to rival the Medici wealth. Put another way, Ezio is the character that people make fun of if someone tries to play them in D&D, although he's not edgy, so there's at least that. He has no real weakness, he can learn anything in about a day or less, and his plans never fail. This isn't necessarily something that detracts from the storytelling overall, but it's something I wanted to bring up as a contrast to the last game and to signal a trend moving forward. With Altair, we don't necessarily get a tragic hero or some nuanced protagonist, it's very much the opposite. But we also get a guy who moves around the Crusades, only interacting with history in a passing way. The Crusader targets he killed are loosely based on real figures, etc., and is otherwise unremarkable, worthy of being left out of the history books. He blended with the crowd, as it were. Ezio, on the other hand, stamps around the Renaissance like an elephant, culminating in an assassination attempt on a pope in front of a full congregation.
Et in unum Dominum Jesum Christum, Filium Dei Unigenitus, et ex Patre natum ante omnia saecula, Deum de Deo, Lumen de Lumine, Deum verum de Deo vero. Genitum non factum consubstantialem Patri, credo in unum Deum Patrem omnipotentem, factorem celi et terrae.
These are not the sort of things that are brushed aside or hidden, and his appearance at so many major times in Renaissance Italy would have caught the eye of some savvy librarian. Of course, we're led to believe that Templars control all knowledge of history, so perhaps they blotted him out, but I feel like that's a big stretch, even for games that focus on ancient aliens. But this Mary Sue-ness makes the game feel a lot less like you're being told a secret history of the world, and more that you're being pandered to. Before we move on to our penultimate chapter, I did want to mention something I noticed days after playing the game. The Bonfire of Vanities DLC is essentially Assassin's Creed 1 compacted into a DLC. 9 names, death tunnel confessions, some of the villains are committing the same crimes, book burning specifically. This isn't really anything, I thought it was just a neat little trick by the devs, showing off how far they'd come from the previous games. Anyway, on to our next chapter.
So, you have your prize again.
Was it worth it? So much bloodshed.
Is it worth saying and or playing? No. Okay, that's not really fair, I'll admit. This game is a huge step forward from the first one in terms of mechanics, complexity, and overall amount of things to do in the game. You can tell that, at least on the gameplay side of things, this is very much what the team at Ubi hoped the first game could be, and it delivers in every way. It's rare that a sequel outdoes its predecessor in most ways, and AC2 really delivered on that aspect. Everything is truly better overall, and there's even more cool weapon deaths, and cue the murder train. But I still wouldn't say that this game is worth playing. Not now, in 2023. For a lot of people, this title represents the high water mark of the series, with future entries just not scratching the itch in the same way. And for those people, the nostalgia attached to this game will forever keep it at the top of their list. It's how I feel about Tribes, or World of Warcraft, or Secret of Mana. You can criticize those games to death, and fairly so, but at the end of the day, they hold a special place in my gaming past, and the memories attached to them, weird as they may be, aren't moved by critical thought. For everyone else, though, that's not the case. Assassin's Creed 2 is a great game if you played it in 2009 and have those memories, but if your first time through the game is in 2023, it's going to feel shallow and oddly paced, with clunky controls and awkward side missions. You'll find yourself in the middle of a relatively generic revenge story, something like you might see in a mobster movie, and wonder to yourself, is this what all the hype is about? It's a story done better in games that have come out in the 14 years since its release, a story done better in dozens of movies and books, a story done better in anime, and the only thing that makes it unique compared to many other stories of its type is the ham-fisted reinsertion of those that came before at the end, an attempt at a twist, if you want to call it that feels unearned. You'll find yourself in control of a protagonist that'll have you wondering if this was written to pander to teenagers, not the aforementioned 35-year-olds. You'll crash Leo's glider half a dozen times before getting to another assassination that's basically the same as the ones that came before it, or try to time your pistol shot against some fireworks only for it to not matter, and you'll eventually beat up the Pope and feel little? Nothing? At the end of the day, whatever attempts the first game made at being a story that had layers, as clumsy as or non-interactive as they may have been, gave that title a sense of wanting to be something a little more than your standard fare, and all of that has been wiped away here. Assassin's Creed 2, for all of its improvements from its predecessor in terms of polish, controls, variety of missions, etc., is a much emptier game on a storytelling level, and in my completely unprofessional opinion, that's not a great thing. I can already hear the counter-argument being made that, I don't play games to think, I don't care if the story of Ezio is unique, the game just has to be fun, and that's completely fair. I don't want to give an impression that I'm the kind of person who only watches highbrow television or listens to hours-long think pieces about the meaning of color yellow in art. Just this morning, I dozed off on my couch trying to figure out if I wanted to watch Chopped or Criminal Minds. Not every piece of media we consume has to be some kind of masterpiece, but that doesn't mean we can't ask for more. In games especially, we're put in control of a character, and we're supposed to live and experience the world through this character. We're asked by the developers to set aside our disbelief and enter this realm of alternate history and precursor aliens, and it's the only form of media that gives us the opportunity to actually impact the way the story is told. We can't button mash through the opening scene of Pulp Fiction or have Luke just stab Vader mid-speech. No matter when you stop reading it, Robb Stark dies in Chapter 51 of A Storm of Swords, and regardless of your headcanon, the last season of Scrubs is in fact real. We can't make JD and Turk run away from med school. But in games, we are, allegedly, in control. As such, why can't we ask that our stories be a bit more than run-of-the-mill? I'm not looking for an interactive documentary, but something with a little substance. And sadly, that's not what we find here.
Get it over with, then.
No. Killing you won't bring my family back. I'm done.
Regardless of my thoughts, this game was obviously a huge hit for Ubisoft, holding its own in a year that saw the release of Dragon Age Origins, Borderlands, Demon's Souls, Uncharted 2 Among Thieves, League of Legends, and Modern Warfare 2. The critical reception was overwhelmingly good, and so Ubisoft decided that we should get an AC game every year for years to come, and it seemed like this would pay off, as the next installment in the series, Brotherhood, is the one that sometimes knocks Assassin's Creed 2 off the top spots in many lists, being equally well received, if not as well remembered. Despite my annoyances with the character, Ezio is overall a more interesting protagonist than Altair, and AC2 improves on everything that AC1 did right while getting rid of everything that it did wrong. Mostly, some of the controls are still a little clunky, but what are you going to do? I just wish it had a bit more substance, something that would stick with me after I turned off the game. But unfortunately, for all its good parts, it just doesn't deliver in that aspect. So would I recommend playing this game today? If you already own a copy, I guess. If you're deeply nostalgic about the title, then yeah, sure. But as of right now, the title is on Ubisoft Store for $30, and I think it's pretty ballsy to ask for $30 for a game that came out over a decade ago, especially since I took my time and filmed as much story as possible, collected all the feathers, and still clocked in at a little under 20 hours. For comparison, Dragon Age Origins, as I mentioned just a moment ago, is also $30 on Steam for the Ultimate Edition, and it's estimated to be about 50 hours in length. No matter how much you like Ezio, I really don't think this game is worth your money. Obviously, if you're a completionist who has to play every game in a series, then go ahead and play this. You'll have a better time than you did with the first one, but overall, I think Ezio says it best when he says, "Requiescat in pace." That's it for me for Assassin's Creed 2. The next game in the Driven by Story series will be Assassin's Creed Brotherhood, since we're going in order, but between then and now I'll probably drop a video about a TV show following the same format. If you've made it this far, thank you so much. You're amazing and I really appreciate you. Let me know what you liked or didn't like in the comments, and remember,
nothing is true. Everything is permitted.